Good afternoon and welcome to Undercurrents. This is the Ordinary People podcast. And today we have an anonymous, angry South African. He is called Jacques, and that's all I actually know about him. So, Jacques, hello, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Sawubona, good morning. How are you guys doing?
Excellent, excellent. So, you decided to remain anonymous, which I think is a relatively good idea. So, what are you angry about?
Well, you'll see I've kept my camera black, which reflects the inside of my soul at this moment. I am, I am a South African. I've recently turned 30 years old, which is I'm sure you'll agree, a very existential age. Um, Lots of
Yeah.
fuel for reflection, lots of fuel for wondering how things could have been. And I would describe myself as an angry South African. Um, Not that I'm angry at South Africa per se, but like all of us, I'm very angry at the state of how things are, and yeah, locked in a very wistful um, gaze towards what could have been, and wondering what we could do better and how we actually get there. For your listeners' interest, I've chosen to remain anonymous because without sounding too mysterious, like I'm working for state intelligence or something, guys don't have to worry. Roman is fine. He's not on any hit list as far as I'm aware for now. He must just behave
Thank you.
himself. I've got a background in politics. I studied politics at varsity, so obviously people that tend to study those sorts of things tend to be angry as a whole. And I was there many moons ago. As I said, I'm recently turned 30, so about 10 years ago, the Fees Must Fall protests at varsity were a very big thing. And we've seen how that still has an impact. Places like Fort Hare and Kwakwa campus at the UFS and so on. I could tell you guys all sorts of stories about what that's like, being on the inside, in the belly of the beast, as a pale male South African on the ground who's in and among all the mania and not actually pro it or part of it, which is a very precarious position to be. That was quite fun. But the reason why I'd like to remain anonymous is that my work isn't very, very political. And I'd just like to speak freely. I think that's the most important thing. And this is a debate we've been
You
having
come
on
to the right
Twitter.
place.
Cool, man. Thanks. And I think now, Roman, you may have a different view on this because your whole people who are pseudo-anonymous on Twitter would call you, and I apologize for using bad language, but we can pretend it's spelled differently. They would call you a face fag, PH8G, which means that you utilize your youthful good looks in a way that your average frog poster probably doesn't, and that comes with its own set of challenges and restrictions because you can't go too crazy, say too much, because
Yes.
you have to maintain that public persona. Yeah.
I've often thought, to be honest with you, I've often thought maybe I should just like leave my main account as it is now and then have an anonymous account and then post what I really want to post. But I think the accountability is very important.
Mm.
So I don't, I post, I don't try to be too mean spirited, but I think I'm very honest when I post for the most part. And I don't need to denigrate the social conversation. I think you can be very straightforward and quite truthful while not being anonymous. But I do understand. I mean, some of my favorite posters on X are anonymous. And I do, and they make money from like Substack, and they've got YouTube channels, and I have no idea what they look like. I have no idea where they live. I just know about their ideas, and I think that's very powerful. When people see my posts, they're like, "Oh, it's Ramon, like fuck him," or
Yeah.
"Oh, it's Ramon, I love him." I thought, like, what is the power of the idea? So anyway, I'm happy to be a face fag.
Good. That's interesting though. But you say you follow a few anonymous guys. May I ask you who, or do you feel that's a bit personal?
Yeah, so they're mostly based overseas. There's a German guy called, I don't know what he's like, Iggy Pius.
Oh, I know.
He became big during COVID. There is Zero. What's his name? Zero something. 040 something. I can't remember. There's Alaric the Barbarian. There's the Golden One from Sweden. There is so many that I follow on a daily
Right.
basis, all extremely right wing, like much more than I am. But I need to see
Okay. Yeah.
what the conversation is on that side. So yeah, those are most of the people that I follow.
That's interesting. Yeah, man. I mean, look, the whole critique, in case we're comfortable talking about like pseudo anonymous right wing accounts, you've probably encountered a guy called BAP, Bronze Age Pervert. Does the name ring any bells?
Of course.
Right. No, we've encountered some of his material. Certainly, it has made waves. Now, he actually, the reason why, in fact, he's the guy from which I actually picked up this whole phrase, and he's very against it, face fagging as he calls it, because he says that impulse to be a media personality is the most dangerous
Hmm.
thing. At the back of your mind, you feel like you're on television, you feel like you're on talk radio, and it's I don't know. I'm not sure if it saps one's courage, uh, if that's the way he would describe it. He says that they tend to want to follow trends and patterns, and they're not comfortable enough to stand aside the crowd by themselves. Look, he's a Nietzschean, so he's very, very fond of this whole archetype of a person who the entirely self-directed individual. And of course, you're a libertarian, so I'm sure you can have a bit of sympathy for that view.
No, Jacques. We were getting along so well. Don't dare call me a libertarian.
Okay.
I
Oh,
was,
oh, sorry.
I,
Okay.
I,
Well,
I was maybe 15 years ago, but no, certainly not anymore. You
right.
haven't been paying attention
Now,
to my tweets
if
lately.
yeah. Now, right. Okay. Well, we did say we could speak about anything, including politics. So, if you don't mind, I mean, I want to hold
Hmm,
your feet to the fire here for a moment, because I remember this. The first time I
hmm,
encountered you was a few years back when the whole purple cow thing was going on, the ZACP. Do you
right.
recall that? Right. So,
Yes.
um, I saw it from the outside. Obviously, lots of people threw shade on it, but I thought it was very brave what you guys were doing. And I'm just curious, like, how did all that come about? How did you meet those people? Um, how did you go from it being, and I say this as someone who's actually had a little bit of involvement with the CI movement and seen how difficult it can be to get any organization up off the ground. People were dunking on you and throwing shade for not having the best electoral performance, but even showing up in and of itself is a huge feat. So I'd be curious to hear that whole story, if you want to.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Yeah, so a very good friend of mine is called Canton Pillay. He has the Overton podcast with Jonathan Witt. It's basically the successor to the Renegade Report. He came to me one day and he's like, "Listen, I think we need a pro-capitalist political party. We should call it the SACP, the South African Capitalist Party, just to mock the communists a little bit because that's what they're called." And I said, "Sounds great. I do everything based on intuition. I don't actually look at long-term effects or strategies or anything like that. My gut tells me it's good, I pursue it." And then he said, "Fine, we need to register." And then I've already secured funding, like about 5 or 10 million rand at the time. I said, "Brilliant, let's go, let's go." Very excited. We registered. It took a long time, and then the funding didn't actually come through. The people that promised it pulled out. So we had
Mm,
a kitty of 300,000 rand to play around with for an 8 week campaign. So we spent it all on digital ads, spent it all on the branding, spent it all on trying to get as much free publicity as possible. And I was shocked and surprised to see, like, even News 24, I remember someone said, "Don't be surprised to see a purple cow in parliament." And I was like, geez, even this guy thinks we are doing something, right? So I was very excited. But at the end of the day, with so little funding, we've got 17,000 votes. You need to double that to get a seat in Parliament. We got more votes than Black First, Land First, who were in the newspapers all the time for saying they want to kill whites. So that was nice.
Mm.
And we beat out a whole lot of other parties that people spoke about, and they were on the news and they had interviews all the time, but they got nowhere, like the Land Party and all these other little commie, even I remember the Social Workers Party, when NUM started their own political party, the Social Workers Party. This is like Irvin Jim and like a huge union, and they got like 12,000 votes.
Yeah.
So I was very surprised to see we received many more votes than those sort of political parties. But looking back, I'm actually quite glad it didn't work out, because to be one or two MPs in Parliament facing an onslaught of utter mediocrity and incompetence for 5 years, I think I would have shot myself. So yeah,
Yeah,
it was a fun experience, but I'm glad it didn't work out. Looking back,
yeah, it's very, very interesting. I mean, there's a few points there we could get into, but the first one that strikes out to me really is the whole funding thing. And this is probably, if anyone's listening, if you want to study politics, if you want to make a real academic study of the subject, I would say following the money is the most useful piece of info you'll ever get. Because, I mean, as Roman, as you've just said, 300,000 sounds like an enormous amount of money to the layman. But if you want to get something together like a political campaign, as you say, it's kiddie money. It's not even go down in the shop and buy Coca-Cola money. It's nothing. You need
that's not even a deposit for the
that.
IEC to be on the ballot, right? You need 650,000
Yes.
rand to be on the ballot in all provinces and national. And I made videos on this, and I keep telling people, if you want to start a political party and get 15 seats, you need R1 billion.
Yeah. And what that means,
Simple
I mean,
as
and
that.
of course, yeah, here I need to see the ground to guys like Robert Digan, who have done a great study on this. And it's actually, if I could critique the like the academic modules in Pulsar that I have done, this is something that's missed by the theory entirely, because, you know, who has $1 billion to give besides the billionaires? And that immediately gets the
Correct.
noggin jogging about how our politics works. Even parties who you would not expect, just purely based on their branding. I mean, the EFF as an example. A few years back, they made a public declaration about how they are very on board with LGBTQ rights and all that sort of thing. And that would have struck anyone with a passing familiarity with EFF members as very odd. It's a very odd thing to campaign on. But then you must realize, okay, well, that's not them speaking. That's a donor. That's a NGO
Correct.
of some kind that said, look, if you're going to take our money, you have to make that part of your messaging. And the world is full. Once you learn to look for these things, you discover, yeah, organizations everywhere are captured in this way. Sadly, it's one of the big problems, I think, of
Correct.
politics. And
Well, it's called elite theory, right? I'm not too sure if you're familiar with the term.
I have heard about it. I'll be honest, I haven't read on politics in a long time. In theoretical politics, I've moved more towards. I'm very fond of history myself, so I'll go into that. But but don't let me stop you. Please go on. I can see you're chomping at a bit to tell me more about it.
So the theory is, there's something called the Pareto principle, which is the 80-20 rule, which was developed by an Italian economist called something Giuseppe Pareto. I don't know what his first name is. But basically what he said is, democracy is fake. The idea that masses of people go to the polls, put their votes in, and then the outcome is determined by the people at the polls is completely incorrect. What actually happens is there are elites in a society that are vying for power and control at all times. They vie against each other mostly. So it's a battle between elite factions of a society. And what these elites do to get their way is that they fund institutions and political parties and populists and people that will get them more power. So in politics in Europe, in politics in America, in any democracy in the world, elites are funding NGOs, think tanks, political parties, Chapter 9 institutions, whatever you call it, so that they can get their foot in the door for that particular lever of power. So in South Africa, with the funders of political parties, there's maybe 5, 6 families for the most part. And if you dig into the political party funding
Mm.
that's available, they all give money to all the parties, not in equal shares, but they all do. Patrice Motsepe gives money to the Freedom Front Plus and the ANC and the EFF and the DA,
Right,
etc.,
right.
etc., etc. So without this funding, the ANC doesn't exist. The DA doesn't exist. The NGOs don't exist either. So the
Mm.
funding determines the behavior, and the behavior is always geared towards the interests of the elites at all times. So how did Donald Trump win the second election? Not only, but a major factor was Elon Musk as an elite saying, listen, I'm going to go and say, this is my man. We're going to go full bore Trump. We're going to pay for a lot of the expenses. We're going to take out adverts. We're going to give $300 million to the campaign. And with that, he managed to sweep Pennsylvania and other swing states where
Mm.
Elon made sure his money was sent to. I'm sure he would have won without Elon, but against Elon, you had everyone else who supports the Democrats, Reid Hoffman, a lot of the Silicon Valley guys. Zuckerberg
Yes,
gave
yes.
Biden $400 million in 2020. So this is actually, so the politicians are the puppets and the elites, the funders actually determine what actually happens. So in South Africa now, the elites are funding the GNU. We can all see it's not working. We can all see it's ineffectual. We can all see that it doesn't make sense. We're not getting any reform, but it's going to stay together despite all those contradictions because the elites want it to remain that way. But the elites will not fund something that opposes the GNU.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. It's very very true, and it's a problem. I think that the most peculiar thing about modern democracies is wherever in the world you look, the irony is this is worse in your well-developed countries compared to your developing ones. Is that if you look at the approval ratings of any given leader anywhere um, in developed countries, they are very very bad. Um, One example is, for example, Starmer in the United Kingdom. Now, I can't quote these facts or figures from memory, but it's hysterically low in some cases. You have leaders who are in power for years, and then the approval rating is somewhere between, say, 11 or 15% or something ridiculous. And of course, the second most important measure of something like that is actually voter participation. And voter
Mm-hmm.
participation in developed countries is in the toilet, absolutely. Like no one bothers. Um, Ironically enough, we here in South Africa perhaps are undergoing something similar, where we have this weird parallax effect where the ANC is going lower and lower, or presenting having worse electoral outcomes in every election. But that's not necessarily because the average person doesn't agree with their policies. It's more of a case of the average person just giving up on politics altogether. And that's actually a very, very dangerous thing if you think about it. This ever growing
Well,
silent majority that's, I would say, look, in another country, this wouldn't be a problem. In the UK, people have this attitude, oh, well, all the politicians are useless, they hate us, whatever. But everybody, whatever they do in the UK, like fish and chips and playing video games inside and so on, it's a very grim society. Uh,
it is grim.
what do we do
Agreed.
is we don't do that because we all don't have video game uh, consoles, right? So what do? We place tires on roadways and throw rocks at people who pass by. Our idea of fun
Yeah.
in the absence of order is a very very dangerous thing, and so the 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 endless nagging unease that people feel in South Africa is that what are we going to do with this increasing mass of people who are entirely shut out of any sort of accountable system. They feel absolutely abandoned, and they're just waiting for permission to tear the whole thing asunder. What do you do? And no one really has an answer for this. Um, Not to hop on too much to Robert Dagan, but I like reading his
Mm.
stuff quite a lot. I've met him in person. I think in our age range, like people in their 20s and 30s. I think he's the only one of the only worthwhile commentators we actually have, worth looking into.
Completely agree.
And yeah, absolutely. And he makes this argument: what's going to happen to our politics when? Because it's interesting. Like Juju is technically off the playing field now. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
people say I'm a little bit skeptical of that because we're not exactly a foreign democracy where people follow procedure as much. I could even see him going to prison as actually helping his campaign because it adds that extra level of like a gangster rapper in the US that goes to prison for a month or so. It actually adds to his cred
Yeah.
a little bit. Um, but yeah, the argument that he makes is okay. Well, Juju's off the playing field. You've got MK. He's referring to the Charterist factions, as we call them. So that's the ANC, the MK, the EFF, and all the little splinter factions I can't name right now. But all of them are sort of on a timer. The ANC's tanking in support because they're all corrupt gangsters, and then the EFF is now rudderless because their leaders going to prison soon, and all their junior leaders have all jumped ship in the last year or so to the MK. But
Yep.
the issue with the MK is that it's a personality cult based around Jacob Zuma, and
Correct.
everything one level underneath him is on fire. I'm not sure if you followed the local news with those guys. It's just endless chaos. The worst sort of just pure incompetence and backstabbing, and they wouldn't be able to organize their way out of a paper bag without Jay-Z himself. And Jay-Z is an old guy.
Correct.
Now,
No,
as
he's
we all
old.
know, the black don't crack. Yeah, he doesn't show it at all because, as they say, but he's yeah, like Nelson Mandela, uh, very great shape for a long time, and then as we've all seen with well, I'm 30 years old now, so I can already feel it coming on. But like with older relatives, they'll be in great shape, and then within a year, something just takes them down, and that could very, very well happen to our dear friend Jay-Z. And then when that happens, MK goes. So what happens then? We have this weird sort of rump GNU that no one votes for, or listens to. It's a weird system. Yeah, I can't see. It's it's
It,
it's
it
probably
is weird,
yeah
and I think. Go ahead.
yeah.
So
I
I'm just
mean,
I'm just ready.
sorry, man.
I'm just ready to
Yeah,
jump in.
sorry, man. I hate to cut you off there, but yeah, it's sort of a weird system. I see someone in the comments is asking about digital ID. I mean, we could get into that. But
No, we
yeah,
will,
it's
we will.
it's
But I think that's an important topic to discuss because the hard left is dying under its own internal contradictions, right? Everything to the left of the ANC is dead in my eyes. Any upstarts get squashed very quickly. Uh, I alluded to the Social Workers Party with it's NUMSA's political party, a union with 350,000 members, and they got 12,000
mm,
votes. Like even the hardcore leftists see that this is all just
yeah,
bullshit. So if we are in a position in South Africa where the DA is the largest party, despite having their strongholds in the Western Cape, which is overwhelmingly white and coloured, we're in a weird space where the DA has to find partners with who, like, with what? There is nothing that can replace the tour de force that is the ANC. We must ask the question: the ANC is the best version of this African nationalist commie race stuff, right? What
but wouldn't
happens
that
when
be
they
the DA?
go? Yeah, okay, but they're not sort of as
Yeah,
race
yeah. Sorry, we don't
obsessed.
want to get too
But
too esoteric.
yeah,
Yeah, sorry.
yeah, but you understand what I'm saying. So where do we go? And it looks like there'll be a sort of permanent GNU until a real populace rises up that takes all the power. I don't know if that can happen because the elites won't fund them, or B, balkanization. And I
Mm,
think the option B is a much more clearer future for South Africa than anything else. And this is what Franz Crenier spoke about in 2013, right? And I can't see anything in the trends that advises me that balkanization won't happen.
yeah.
I think it will just accelerate from now
I
on.
mean, sure. I mean, anyone who is on the CI side of things hope that'll happen Personally, I'll be very honest, I have my doubts, for the simple reason that what one must always remember is that even though the organizations that the majority political culture in our society, what they generate could disappear and collapse under its own contradictions, um, the people that brought that party to power aren't going anywhere. And any political movement that exists and actually functions will have to be something ANC like in order to fill that void. And this is something that the DA is discovering, to their great detriment, and that in order to expand into that vacuum, it's had to adopt some aspects that it wishes that it wishes it didn't have to. It's in this awkward spot right now where it wants to be sort of a majoritarian party, but it discovered a few years back under Musi Maimane that it can't do that without alienating its base. And so they're like they're a little bit like if you could picture one of those like New World monkeys with the long arms. He wants to swing from one vine to the other, but he just can't reach it. And they can't, if they were to push that idea too much and they abandon their core electorate in the Western Cape and they try to become Rise Mzansi 3.0, and it just fails spectacularly, and they could disappear from the political map within a single election cycle. And so they're in this very awkward spot. The thing that the thing that CI guys are hoping for is that everybody just accepts that balkanization takes place. But you have to understand, I think to illustrate my point, and this, again, I'm sorry to sound like I'm piggybacking off Robert Digan, but he's the one from the Western Cape, so he knows what's going on that side. But he noted something very, very interesting, that a few years back he had a discussion apparently with someone, an insider in the DA, who spoke to him about their electoral strategy in that part of the world. And he says something very, very interesting. He says that what happens is that the local structures of the EFF and the ANC and those guys don't function at all. So you don't see like big election campaigns. They've given up on the province for now. But there is the potential there for them because people from other parts of the country are migrating there in very great numbers. The Western Cape is the one part of the country where informal settlements are growing instead of shrinking. And that's mostly because of migration from the Eastern Cape and those places. And as we've seen in Europe, as we've seen elsewhere, in an ideal world, if someone flees a bad situation, they do a bit of self-reflection and they decide, okay, well, I'm going to be more like this new place that I'm moving to. But sadly, as the saying goes, wherever you go, there you are. People bring their habits with them. And this creates...
And their blood feuds.
Yeah, everything about them. And so this happens like in the United Kingdom, for example, with all their migrant politics and all the things that those, like riots between...
between the Shia and the Sunnis and the Hindus.
All that. So, every time an armed conflict anywhere in the world happens, there'll be mobs of people from those countries fighting each other in the streets of London. That's just the way it is. I've actually thought about this, and if I were to take Trump's offer of refugee status, and I paddle my way over in like a little rubber dinghy, and I end up in the States, I wouldn't. If they said, okay, from now on, you can never utter a single word in Afrikaans ever again. No braais, no rugby, nothing distinctly South African. You're going to drop your accent. You're going to become like us 100%. I would feel a little bit put upon. I would feel a little bit irritated. I would try my best. Like, for example, obviously I'm Afrikaans right now. One of the options, because of what I do, and because I speak English, one of the life options I do have is going to a place like the UK, maybe doing your master's or your PhD there, working in the research space on that side. And obviously, because I'm aware of the migrant politics and whatever, I do my best not to play the whole sassy foreigner thing. I want to integrate as much as possible. But what'll sit like a bone in my throat is the fact that I am Afrikaans after all. So I would be very cross with someone if they were to, for example, dismiss something like the Anglo-Boer War, even though I myself don't like it when the Solidariteit and AfriForum and those guys make too much of a big deal about that. That's something we could get into, actually. This is a turn in Afrikaans culture I really don't like, is the way in which we've adopted grievance politics. And here I can already tell people are going to start fuming, right? This is why I wanted to remain sort of pseudo anonymous, not just because I'm going to make left-wing people angry. Okay, I want an open field where I can criticize some of the right as well. This whole thing where we look at, like, the post World War II sort of discussions about the Holocaust, and we look at all the identity politics around Black nationalism and the way they look at slavery and those things, and we say, aha, we're going to do that for ourselves as well. It's what I don't like about it is that they're almost excited when they discover that there was this historical tragedy that their people suffered from as well, and then they use that as as sort of a club to wield in this match online. And I don't like that. I feel it dishonors the memory of those people. I get this. I can't say this because I'm a man, but there's this lovely Afrikaans saying that I heard from a woman once, where she said, "Laat my koekare krul." Okay, and so okay, you understand that. Sorry, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure how good your Afrikaans was. But yes.
Ek is 'n Franse boer, right? 'n Boer maak 'n plan, 'n Franse boer maak twee. I grew up in an Afrikaans farming area south of Joburg. When I arrived in this country, for the first 15 years, 16 years of my life, I was just surrounded by Afrikaners. So I understand the culture
Okay.
quite
that's
well.
great then.
So
That's great then.
yeah, that's why I'm talking to Corne Mulder a little bit later. And maybe I should
In
maybe I should
Afrikaans.
have the whole interview in Afrikaans.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be able to adequately express. I'll just use a lot of swear words, and I don't think he would appreciate that. So we'll just leave it in English for now, for the most part. So someone says this lefty is okay. That's you, Jacques. You're a lefty
Okay,
now.
I'm not sure
Okay.
if he is.
We accept you.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I'm not sure if he's like Genghis Khan or something, where I'm a lefty compared to him. I'm not a lefty at all. If I come across that way, I suppose I've spent too much time at studying politics at varsity. I'm very sorry for that. I hang my head in shame. But as I was saying,
Yeah.
there's this
But everyone to the
photo.
left of Franco is left. Good.
Yeah, I mean, there's this photo, and I can't remember the girl's name, to my shame, but there's a photo of this Afrikaans girl that's dying of cholera from that time period, and it looks horrendous. It looks like something from the Holocaust, and yeah, I and like she's like essentially naked and so on, and I hate seeing that photo, and I hate seeing people prop it up as some sort of grisly trophy to rub in other people's faces. I think we're not a culture, Western culture, which Afrikaners are a derivative of. There's a reason why we're Protestants. There's a reason why we birthed philosophies like libertarianism. There's a reason why, Nietzsche was a German. This whole idea of being self-directed, not feeling sorry for yourself, not being part of a herd, being very individualistic. Some people have made the argument that capitalism, this is what leftists do. They say, oh no, it's capitalism that's alienated us from each other. No, we've always been like this. And I wish I could remember who wrote this, but there was this author who made the very, very lucid, no, that's not the right word, but he made this eloquent argument that essentially what we know is the English way of being has been there since the Middle Ages, and he defines this as, okay, it's one man and one woman living together in a house. The children don't stay in the house; the children move away. People don't linger in the same place forever. They buy and sell their property. They're quite mobile. There's social mobility in the sense that people are allowed. They've got a little bit of freedom to grind and sort of improve their station in life. And yeah, our community bonds aren't. That is a big problem. Our community bonds aren't as solid, and we have this problem in modernity where we have lots of loneliness and despair and all that sort of thing, and that's a real problem. But one thing that BAP talks about we've spoken about earlier, that I absolutely agree with, is that the attempt to rope us into this sort of communal living as a solve to loneliness or whatever, it's really not the answer. One guy called me a leftist earlier. I know that I'm not a leftist because when I look at socialist experiments, what horrifies me in particular is this forced socialization, the communalization. I was watching a documentary on Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge the other day, this thing where people lost their names, they lost their private property, they lost their family connections, they're forced to live in these communal settings where everybody observes everyone else. I agree. I can't remember which French philosopher said this, but he said, hell is other people, and I absolutely agree with him. The most important freedom is the freedom to be apart, I think. And people are going to run with that one. But this guy supporting segregation, selling peace. Please don't mistake that.
There's a meme now. There's a meme in America now about how much money is being spent to like remove ourselves from like ghetto people. It's like I spent $1 million on my house, and I spent this on my car, and I spent this on my education just so I can get away from like hippies, rednecks, and like the ghetto black Americans. And that's the price of civilization. Like, that's a good point.
Exactly. And I mean,
it's a very good point.
What you just put there, and this is what I'm interested in really, is because people always make this argument and say, well, we need to there's a lot of politics in the modern world everywhere from every side as well. We need to take our part of the world back. But the big question then is, what do you do after that? Okay, so say, for example, Reform UK takes power, there's bigger immigration. What then? How? In what way do they relate with those other countries and other parts of the world? I think that's going to be a far more important question, because that's the big overarching question, I think, that's hanging over all of our heads everywhere. All the billions of us. We've got a few parts of the world where things run very, very well, and we've got big parts of the world where things aren't running very, very well. And the parts that run well don't have the capacity to handle everyone. So what do you do? In what way do you maintain that sort of structure in a way that those relations can still be maintained? Guys like AfriForum locally make the case that, well, we everzijds verhoudingen tussen gemeenskappe, that sort of thing, where, well, we need to think of each other as communities, and my community is here and your community is there, which obviously people are right to say does sound a little bit verwoordish, but they say, look, we don't want to go so far as to say we are the best community and we should rule over you necessarily. But people who criticize
more
that,
people should do that. Not rule, but just say, no, I'm extremely proud of my community, and I would gladly stay here. If you want to join me, I'll help you create your own, but we have to interact at a level that is decent, that is amicable, but we shouldn't ever expect each other to force integrate. I think rainbowism has been one of the greatest fatal flaws in South Africa, where you have segregation for 2 generations. And now all of a sudden, everyone is this free, atomized individual based on the Rainbow Nation, blah, blah, blah. Complete fucking bullshit, right? Like, just complete bullshit. I speak to everyone under the sun on the show and in real life. Like my accountant's Indian, and my plumber is white, and my whatever electrician is black, and this guy's like a foreigner, and this guy's an Uber driver, and whatever. I speak to everyone, right? The difference is in terms of just the idea of what justice is between all these people is so vast. They get along, but they can trade with each other. They can certainly speak to each other. They maybe won't have like meals together. Of liberalism, where like everyone is sort of made in the image of God, which I actually agree with, but it doesn't mean that we are all equal in the sense of to each other. Not equal. We're all equal under God, but I should be free to self-segregate. Communities should be free to self-segregate, not impose and be violent to others. But you should be more than happy. We allow the Somalis to do it in Minnesota. We allow the Haitians to do it in Springfield, Ohio. We allow the Cubans to do it in Miami. But like, if a white person wants to do it, like, no, we have to bring the ATF and like shoot everyone. I think that's crazy.
Yes,
Like,
yes,
people should self-actualize
and
as a community on their own terms.
yeah, and that's going to be the big political question really of the century, is reversing, because where
Yes,
it comes from ultimately is that Western societies have been victims of their own success. Smuts, um, again, I'm sorry,
correct.
Diagonism. I'm an avid Diagonist, let me just say. But yeah, Smuts was, and he's a very, very interesting lodestar for where the British Empire was in the beginning of the 20th century. I mean, he starts as an Afrikaner guerrilla leader fighting the British, and then only a few years later, he's responsible for putting in place its apotheosis, which is this grand idea. Okay, there's going to be a thing called the League of Nations. We're going to unite all of mankind under this one single ideology. Um, the thing though that they and it would be fascinating actually to go back in time and speak to those people to say, look, um, what do you picture this is going to be? Because what they had in mind, the issue we have is that our current world is justified by philosophies who would never have imagined our world as something that could possibly eventuate. So, for example, people would talk about the rights of man, liberalism, and so on. Those people had views which would make me and you sound like left-wing lunatics. If you told
Correct.
Smuts, for example, that, okay, in a few decades, this thing called the League of Nations is going to fall apart. There's going to be infighting amongst the Westerners, and then once that's done, you're going to have a fruition of your idea called the United Nations. Only the issue with the United Nations is it's going to be mostly populated with the descendants of people who were colonized by Europeans, and they're going to make up the majority, and they're going to make effectively all the meaningful decisions for that reason, and they're going to do it out of a spirit of hostility to you and your project as a Westerner. That's not what he had in mind. I can't imagine that's. I can't imagine Smuts was thinking, well, what's going to happen is we're going to have a League of Nations, and then in a few years, Africa is going to be the largest voting bloc, them and the people from the Middle East, for example. That's not what they had in mind. And so, yeah, but of course, it's not going to last because the 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 developing countries took one look at that and said, okay, well, we can't let ourselves be dictated to by these guys. And so they've erected these ramparts like, oh, this is the Security Council, or this is the G20, or this is this and that, the Club of Rome, and so on. There's this inner sanctum where we make decisions for ourselves. We exist on this side of the drawbridge, and yeah, that makes a mockery of the whole idea of there being equality and so on. No one takes it seriously. You can't have an ICC in a world where, America unilaterally breaks those agreed upon rules and then can't put its own leaders to the task. So yeah, and it's breaking
Yeah,
down right in front of us. All these coups you
I
see in
always
West Africa.
revert back. I revert back to Ian Smith. Ian Smith was interviewed on the BBC, I think, in 1975 or 1976, somewhere on there. So Ian Smith, leader of Rhodesia, for those who might not know. And if you don't know, shame on you. You should know these things. But anyway, and they asked him, like, point blank, Mr. Smith, like, are you a racist? Like, not in the slightest. All I want is standards. I don't care who you are. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what race you are. If you reach a standard, you may vote, you may partake, you may be as free as you want to be. But if we do not have standards, we go back to ethnic cleansing, blood feuds, whatever you want to call it. So have some standards, and you have everything available to you to live a fruitful and fulfilling life. And I agree with that premise in terms of I think we have lost the idea that democracy can only work if there is a standard for how people conduct and behave themselves. Now, the human rights regime says anyone with two legs is as equal as anyone else with two legs. And I think that's a fatal, fatal, fatal flaw. I'm not saying we impose, okay, we have to impose some kind of culture in a way, but we have to impose a culture that is for the benefit of that society. I know people have different ideas on what that looks like, but it goes back to South Africa. We can't have this. I see people in the comments are saying, "Oh well, the Nats tried segregation; it didn't work." No, no, they tried forced segregation. Forced segregation never works. Creates anxiety, creates resentment. It's a bad idea, as we saw with the fall of apartheid. But we have to. What point am I trying to make? In essence, I think democracy only gives and doesn't expect anything in return, and we need to find a way to give something in return to enjoy the full benefits of freedom. I'm hoping I'm making sense there.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the democracy is something which was never conceived to develop, that it would develop into something that we have right now. Um, the demos, the idea of the core part of the population that actually makes the decisions, was always a minority in practice. In like ancient Greece, where it first originated, um, there were very
Correct.
strict
The
exclusions. For
elites. Yeah.
example, yeah, the elites, how they solved that issue there was they decided, well, the soldiers are the ones, the young men actually going out fighting are the ones that actually sacrifice for the state, so they should be the ones that make the decisions. But of course, that was a workable solution when everybody was fighting in phalanxes, where your armor and your weapons cost as much as a house and a car would today, where you had to be sort of a part of the middle class for your entry ticket to even participate in military campaigns. But the Athenians ran into
Yep.
this problem where um, they relied on their navy. Only the issue with the navy is that you've got lots of what we would today call working class people pulling the oars, and you couldn't make an argument for the oarsmen not being part of that demos as well. And so, yeah, the nature of these things is they start very restrictive, and then gradually the definition expands and the restrictions loosen. And we're in this weird situation where we're way on the other end of history now, where we need to, yeah, reinvent these systems. And I think we need to be more comfortable with the idea of, I would say, not like segregation is the wrong word. It implies this sort of arbitrary thing.
Mm.
We need to be more comfortable with the idea of, I would say, yeah, fraternity. Like in West Africa, this is a obscure example, but in West Africa they have these for centuries, probably millennia, but definitely centuries. They've had these male fraternities in quite a few different societies. Like they're having a civil war, armed conflicts right there currently in Mali and Burkina Faso and Niger, and those societies between like
Correct.
local militaries, local military regimes, and then local Islamists. And then what makes the situation so chaotic is that you've got inter-community violence as well, which the governments can't really control, and then makes everything a lot more chaotic. But that conflict is being prosecuted largely by the male members of those communities who belong to what academics call hunter fraternities. So these are groups of men who youngsters will be initiated into, very similar to how in my part of the world, in the Eastern Cape, you have what's called Urwaluko, when the Xhosa initiates Amakweta, they say going to the mountains, and they have ceremonies there which are not elucidated to outsiders, and they become men. And these things play a very, very important role in politics, actually. Um, of course, everybody knows about Freemasonry and so on. But if you want to actually have an impact, you need to have a core group of people who are effectively friends of a sort, and
Mm-hmm.
and aren't official in a way that can be targeted. That's the thing. We any like public facing organization is something that can be taken apart, whereas it's more difficult to take something apart when it's effectively an informal network of people that meet on a regular basis, that share ideas, that you know plan together, that may belong to many different organizations, but do still share the same goal. Yeah, but that I
I just
think
want to refer to, yeah,
the
go ahead.
problem there, I think the problem there is leadership. And it's a difficult thing because we can talk about what sort of systems we can put in place, but at the end of the day, we need people, and it'll have to be youngsters, right? Um, and look,
Mhm.
I know people are a little bit cynical because here in our society we talk about the youth all the time, and the youth are not the moral exemplars they should be necessarily, right? Talking about Fort Hay and Kwakwa campus
No,
at University
they
of Free
never
State, to
are in
give you an
any
example.
society, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think we do get cynical, especially as we get older. We like to shit on the younger guys, but I mean, I know I wouldn't say I know the guy, but I've met Robert King, who is big in the CI movement, and he's young. He's like in his early 20s or something, and he's probably one of the more competent individuals I've had the privilege of meeting in my life. And yeah, if anyone asks, I'll always refer to him to say, look, the leadership is there. We must just let those personalities actually have the leeway to get shit done. Say no to these suffocating bureaucracies. Say no to social pressure and conformity and loyalty to uh, vague abstract ideas that no one believes in anyway, and let the guys who've as Lee Kuan Yew says, who've got that iron in them, let them show the way, and,
Mm.
and they'll show other people what to do.
Yeah, completely. Until they fire you for mean tweets from 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I just want to close off. Bronze Age pervert, Bab, he is rumored to be a guy called Costa someone or other. I can't remember. But this Costa someone wrote a book called Selective Breeding and the Birth of Philosophy. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
I've seen references to it online. Yeah, I haven't read it though. I understand
Yeah.
the basic ideas that it goes back to the whole PIE, Proto-Indo-European thing, and it says that basically when humans from that part of the world began to breed animals, we began to have a theory of the same thing for people. And of course, we call this eugenics
Correct.
today, but even Plato had this idea that we could, if we're very careful with how we have kids, we could perfect mankind effectively and overcome all our deficiencies that way.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it has been borne out in science. I read a book called Our Troubled Inheritance, which looks at genetically every single human being is exactly the same, but there are genetic mutations that are particular to certain groups that make sense for the social environmental context of that particular group. So in selective breeding and the birth of philosophy, the idea is that the aristocracy, the rulers, the elites, the leaders, married other leaders, other elites, other members of aristocracy. And through the bloodline of these elites over the course of a century, 2 centuries, 3 centuries, you have the same genetic mutations happening that do up the IQ, that do up the capacity for numerology, the capacity for understanding, the capacity for a lot of intellect that we think of today, which is why um, the idea that civilization is from actually smart people getting together and birthing even smarter children over time is the birth of philosophy, is the birth of civilization, because the genetic mutation is so constrained by that social order that you do get these elites in society that just perpetuate as time goes on. And obviously that fell down with the industrial revolution. It fell down with these ideas of the enlightenment. It fell over World War One killed off the aristocracy in Europe for the most part. A lot of the people that died in World War One were heirs to aristocrats in all parts
Mm.
of Europe, from Italy to Portugal to Germany, whatever the case might be. But these people still exist, and I wonder if using AI and science and all sorts of things, I wonder if the future of power is going to be determined by the same sort of idea, where you're just going to have human beings with particular genetic mutations that can be the intellectual, political, economical leaders of future countries. And I wonder if we're going to go back to a more pseudo monarchy that has noblesse oblige. So the elites today have no noblesse oblige. They don't have any duties to anyone other than themselves. But in the future,
Hmm.
I wonder if it might work out that the aristocracy has all these privileges, but we know for a fact that you need to have these duties as well because you don't want to be guillotined, right? Like the French did. So that's just
Correct.
an
Yeah,
interesting
correct.
theory out there. One that I've been thinking about for quite a while. I don't think it will work out. I think the world is far too egalitarian for that sort of thing to happen. But I think with science we can in some way.
Well, I
I don't know
mean,
how it's going
look,
to work out though.
yeah, I mean, when we speak about what's allowed and not allowed, we have to remember that the Occident or the West or the Western Hemisphere, which I would describe, many people only mean like North America and Europe when they say that. I would include South America and Africa too, for the simple reason that because of uh, the colonial period and migration and so on, all of us are in each other's business now. We're
Correct.
each of our philosophies influences everybody else. We're stuck in this together. We're part of the same sort of framework. We speak the same languages and so on. Consume the same media or whatever. The big open question over the next, I would say, 100 years is to say, okay, in light of those that want to remain orderly and whatever, and those that will make demands upon them, the big question is going to be what China does ultimately. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we, as if I mean, if I can call us Westerners, I can already hear some of the sort of charterist types throwing vitriol at me. But let's just let's say okay, the woke and more correct in the mainstream, right? We're Westerners. We may actually remain a sideshow. The big question is going to be how does China tackle that problem? And I think they may actually have it. Yeah, if I mean there are arguments for and against how well they could manage that, but what I mean is they could certainly create an actual elite. They have something very very similar going on with their huge like CCP party that manages the whole country, that has this unspoken
Yep.
agreement with at least that's how the theory goes. They have an unspoken agreement with their populace, but also they don't share Christian morality. Um, they
No.
may look at an anti-egalitarian noblesse uh, oblige strategy. Sorry, you're the French speaker. Sorry, even though even though I've got the French name as well. Um, they may actually take that approach with the rest of the world while still maintaining a bit of a distance. But yeah, they've got other. It's a big China is a bit of a mystery because on the one hand they do come across as very authoritarian, very hierarchical. Their culture is like that, but on the other hand, they came
Mm.
about sort of very much in a post World War II environment. They're run by a communist party. All their PR and their whole diplomatic style is very much, well, look, the Americans are, we're here for international law and human dignity and all that sort of thing. And the Americans are just abandoning that.
Yeah.
So they're replete with contradictions as well. But absolutely, they're making great gains in terms of science. And I don't see them as a society that would hold back, for example, if they could somehow in a generation figure out how to cure addiction or make everyone an athlete
Yeah.
or math Olympiad. They would
Yeah.
absolutely do it 100%. And then how do
And they're quite
they?
willing to, and they're quite willing to fold up the freedom belt and tighten it by not allowing kids to do like more than 3 hours of video games a week, right? Their TikTok is highly regulated. You watch construction works happening on TikTok or whatever, like this great Shein factory or whatever. You go to TikTok here, it's all fucking trannies and bullshit like that.
Right.
Funny enough, like I think the Chinese model, ironically, where the elites, I'm not going to say the elites are trusted, but I think the elites understand the duty to the people. If you have a bullet train opening every 2 days, do you really give a shit about who you're going to vote for? Like, I wouldn't. right? Like if I see so much improvement, infrastructure development over the course of my lifetime, do I even know what voting is? Do I even care what voting is? I don't think I would in the slightest. I think China is screwed by their one-child policy, and I think long-term their demographics are going to collapse, which is one of the massive mistakes they have made. Of course, with the genocide that they committed and all that, I'm not a defender of the Chinese by any means, but as an intellectual force, they are wildly underrated. And I think they
Yeah,
would have no qualm about pursuing strategies that democracies cannot.
exactly. Yeah, very much so. There's this, talking about pseudo anonymous accounts. There's this guy on Twitter called Favela Overlord. Is his tag? He's got a profile picture of like the Patrick Star character from SpongeBob as his what is it? Profile. I say profile picture because I grew up on Mixit, but I understand the kids, the little zoomies, call it something else now. But yeah, and he writes. Well, he should write more often. He's only got like 1 or 2 Substacks, I think, so far. But he tweets, zeets on this quite often, where he talks in very frank terms about how much progress the Chinese have made. Now, we sort of coped throughout the years by saying, well, yeah, China has basically monopolized almost every industry and every form of manufacturing, but their products are so super low quality, and they're sort of copiers at heart. They're not innovators. And the thing is, what we've slept on is the fact that they were setting the foundation stones for just that. We gave them lots of shit for all the environmental damage that they caused and so on. But the fact of Favela Overlord makes the point to say, look, economy is all about trade-offs. The Westerners have great environmental laws, but the cost of that has been no new infrastructure for like decades and gradual deindustrialization. The Californians can't. We've all heard the story where I think it was I can't recall where this company was from, but they wanted to build like a bullet train system in California, and they said it took them so many years to do it. They went to Morocco and had it done in like a 10th of the time. Yeah, that's a stunning indictment of the United States, but a lot of we have some of that as well, because so many of the Americans, like NGOs, have a big impact on us, like our environmental laws and so on. So we could have been energy independent years ago with our potential offshore oil reserves. I mean, Namibia has loads, so we ought to have at least some. But yeah, correct. China looked at that and said, okay, look, we're gonna win. And that's going to be the challenge of the future, is how we balance the urge to want to excel and be the best without losing our moral principles, which are obviously the most important thing at the end of the day. So yeah, let's end it there.
Don't know if I agree with you there. I think winning is more important. As someone on X once said, he's called Comfortably Smug. He's like a right-wing kind of American guy. He's like, listen, Zoomers, let me tell you something your boomer parents won't tell you. All your principles and your morals and all that means nothing if you don't win. Win, then you can do whatever the hell you want. If you catch on to these morals and principles, you're never going to win, and they're just going to fucking roughshod all over you. So I'm in the camp of like, just win at all costs, and then you control everything, and then you can do whatever the hell you want. So anyway, listen, Jacques, we've been going for an hour. Are you happy to take some questions from the chat for the next 10 minutes or so? Yeah, and then I think we'll wrap it up.
If there's any questions. So, I saw, not to put words in anyone's mouth, but I think I did see in the chat someone was asking someone about CI earlier. What was wrong with the Cape Independence Party? Okay, if I could just answer that question based on discussions I've had with some of the guys on the inside, it's it's the classic case of too many people want to be in charge. You need to be, and that's not their fault. It's just a fault of, look, it's such a wacky, unique, avant-garde sort of movement. You need to be quite a wacky personality to want to be in there, and too many people with sort of main character syndrome. But I do understand that recently a lot of the deadlock has been cleared. They've agreed to um, they've agreed to collaborate on, I think it's the 2026 local government elections that are coming up in next year, 2026. So if I wish them all the best, and I myself am going to be involved in the election campaign to my best capability. So I hope we win. I hope we do very well.
Yeah, no, I think it would be good. The DA needs competition. I don't care. Well, I do care where it comes from, but yeah, if it's to the right of the DA, it's much better than to the left of the DA, because the DA will just swallow up the left and then just take it over. So Hannes wants to know if the national dialogue is still up and running. I completely forgot. Memory hold that completely. Do you know, Jacques? Have you been invited to go dialogue with?
If I've been
commies
invited
and
in my
pedophiles?
personal capacity, I'm unfortunately not. Not that I think I've been missing anything important. That's a very, very good question. So many people pulled out. Someone actually was mentioning this on Twitter the other day, and like you say, I'd entirely forgotten about it. I really can't answer your question. Sorry, man. I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, and people say, why do I say commies and pedophiles? Because the convener is some academic at Stellenbosch who wrote a paper about sort of sexual attraction to minors shouldn't be an
Oh
illness or
yes.
something like that. So that's why I use the term pedophile. So it is accurate. So don't come at me. Human Rights Commission. Not that I would give a fuck if they do, to be honest. That's a kangaroo court of the highest order. So come on, guys, please do post your questions. We've got another few minutes. So Johan wants to know, what will the CI be offering for local government, though?
Well, that's a very good question. But look, they are being advised by people on the ground. From what I understand, their main strategy is to really go for these big issues that the DA have just been ignoring. Again, sorry, I'm going to refer to Robert Digan, but his writing does go into quite a lot of detail into local corruption scandals that's happening on the ground that the DA are ignoring entirely. We've seen a little bit of what's going on underneath the surface of the water with this whole Kanimeyer scandal. The big problem is that the DA, number one, they ignore corruption. Number two, they're sitting on their laurels on the Western Cape. They're not looking after the infrastructure. Number three, they're leaving a lot of the old structures that the ANC created still intact, including things like enforcing BEE for procurement and all of that. So I'm not the best person to answer that question, but if I were to advise them, I would say, you target those things. You target the things that the DA are ignoring.
Yeah, no, I agree. I saw the latest budget. I think 92% of the infrastructure budget is going to like poor areas, and these poor areas didn't exist 10 years ago. So it just seems like a terrible incentive. It really does.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure what the idea is, so that the president doesn't say that you're racist. I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah, and ultimately, this is the big shift that will need to happen in the moral outlook of the DA if they want to keep their existing base, is because you're not winning anyone over. The people, the EFF and ANC supporters who benefit from this sort of infrastructure spend, at most they think you're a fool. At least they, it doesn't really register. It doesn't really change their minds. That's the sad fact, and it's really the one. The big fissure in the sort of post 94 consensus is that the one side was under the impression that they could mend the relationship by being more generous, and the other side was under the impression that that like mending the relationship wasn't really the point. It was more okay. Well, we can rub it in your face now. To simplify it, but there's not a very clear two-way understanding, which I think something like balkanization or federalization might actually help in a way, because it'll allow for, I think, a more honest way of relating to one another if we are in fact living in different systems and not under the same system. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can agree with that. And the problem with spending all that money on the poor communities is that you're just incentivizing criminality. I mean, to take over land, to sell it off corruptly, to um, not allow the police to go in or not allow services to go in. This is all criminality. So you're just incentivizing that. It's like, if this guy's on heroin. Okay, let's get him off heroin by giving him more heroin. No, just lock him in a room and
Mm.
take away heroin. Like that's the way to go.
Yeah,
Show
yeah.
me the man, I'll show you the incentive. Yeah. Anyway, Kwanzaa doesn't ask the statement. The PA is taking over the coloured vote. They doubt that the RP will have a strong chance at governing the local municipalities. I think that's true to some extent. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I wish we actually touched upon. It's a very, very fascinating topic. But I'd say the if you could call it the political awakening of the South African colored community is probably the big story of the last few years, and it's only
Correct.
going to become a bigger one. The big question is what they ultimately do with it. Do they? I mean, Steve Biko. Sorry to sound like a leftist, but I mean, Steve Biko did touch on this. He says the coloreds in South Africa, um, being of mixed ancestry, they're in a very interesting position where they act sort of as a bridge between the different cultures, and they can, they're in a unique position of picking both. I mean, Gayton McKenzie as an individual personality really does exemplify this. On the one hand, he throws K bombs, and on the other hand, he considers Julius Malema to be uh, uh, a brother of his because they're both, non-white South African individuals who've been through prison together. So, yeah, um, the big question that they'll have to ask is that can they accept being effectively second in line in a sort of Azania focused South Africa, or do they want to go the do they want to take the big plunge for something like Cape Independence, where they'll have effectively a country of their own? I
Mm,
mean, I know it's up to them. I know which one I would pick, and I understand why they are skeptical. And I think the CI movement is a little bit SOTI. It's very it's Anglo, and it
yeah.
wants to avoid difficult topics like that. And here I think uh, a more like the Afrikaners could probably be in a better position, because you need to have frank conversations with people and say, look, we really screwed you guys over in the last few decades. You can have a frank conversation with them in a way that you can't have a frank conversation with, say, an EFF supporter, because the EFF supporter will just use
Mm,
that as an opportunity to shout at you. But I think there is an opportunity, a very small window for us to sort of see eye to eye on this in the Western Cape and say, look, the forced removals of the 1950s, you guys really did do your best to integrate, and then we, after 1948, we
yeah.
took your votes away, we rejected you. We need to clear the air there, and say, look, if we become an independent country, we can heal, we can move forward, or you guys can go over to the ANC side, but then you're living in Zimbabwe forever. I mean, who wants to do that? Frankly, yeah,
Yeah, it's
it's
interesting. I was speaking so in law school we learned about the Harris case where they disenfranchised the colours from the voters' roll in the Cape, because the Cape Colony at the time they had not universal suffrage, but they had a standard that if you meet the certain standard you can vote irrespective of race. It was always a bit more progressive than the rest of the country. And the Nats came in and completely destroyed any of the social bonds between the Afrikaners of the Cape and the coloureds of the Cape by taking them off the voters' roll through the Harris cases and all the rest of it, which is
mm,
possibly one of the greatest fumbles the Nats ever did. That and small apartheid. And people think, oh, I'm not defending anything. I'm saying if you believed in that system, the two things that brought it down the most was alienating the coloureds and then putting signs on benches in public saying whites only, right? Like those are the two main things that actually
yes, yes.
create resentment.
Um,
The rest of the
I
stuff,
mean,
terrible as it is, it can be accepted by a lot of people. But yeah, the colors and Afrikaners need to reconcile to save the Cape.
yes, and
It'll
I
be
think
interesting to see
that's
it.
the reason why I make such a point of that is because I think um, uh, it's much easier to reconcile those two groups than it would be to reconcile um, I think white and black South Africa, even though that's what the new South Africa tried to do. There's sadly in black South African political culture all the way back from the like the incipient moments, the not inciting incident, but their political culture, for example, under the Xhosas, the first black South African group that encountered the white settlers. Their history with the whites starts with someone called Makanda, who had this prophecy that the whites would eventually be pushed into the sea. And you can basically say that that string, that theory has carried them through all the way to the present, that in some small way, the Xhosas who helped form the ANC, the modern ANC, still dreams of that day. Whereas, even though we mistreated the coloureds quite badly, frankly, in the 1980s, the Nats campaigned in the Western Cape, and there were quite a few colours that actually voted for them. That shows you that even at the lowest possible ebb, there were some that said, "Okay, look, you guys haven't treated us very well, but there is a certain vision of civilization that we still do share, and I think we should go for it." So I'm a unique case. I'm an Afrikaner from the Eastern Cape. I'm not like Adams Roots, and what's the other one? Conscious Caracal and Van Sale. I'm not like Van Sale and Roots. I'm an Afrikaner from the Eastern Cape, which means I'm very anglicized. My grandfather fought with the English during the Second World War. We've been aspirationally English for a very long time. My mother put me down when I was 4 years old to watch Teletubbies in the hope that I would learn English, and she absolutely succeeded. I can speak English almost better than I can speak Afrikaans, right?
Yeah,
so
it worked.
My first political memory, and we all have memories of different kinds, but my first political memory was my grandmother. Now, you have to understand, she's an Afrikaans woman who grew up, who was born in the 1920s. So she's not, I mean, a 5-minute conversation with this woman would make the average left-wing American's head explode. We've had a very frank conversation, but I don't even want to say some of the things she said, just to like pseudonymous though I am now. But I mean, it was so striking for me that as a child, she would go on about this, about how sad it was that because of the system that the Nats imposed, that the families were split. She spoke about this quite at length, and how sad it was that the families were split because there was, some parts of the family that could count as whites and other parts that weren't. And so I don't want to sound like a sexist, but women, if they have a very strong political view, the odds are that they picked it up from the men in their family or the men who are around them. So I can only assume that my grandfather was the same way, because he was. It's a very strange situation because he voted like for the National Party after coming back from the war for the rest of his life, and yet. He held this view. He spoke about it quite at length, and I think that speaks to the fact that yes, even the Haragat racist white Afrikaners do feel a certain bond and obligation to the colours, and I think we must make the best of that. That's what I hope to see. That's why I support CI. That's what I hope the CI movement can actually achieve.
Yeah. No, I think it's a very important question. But Jacques, we need to end it there. I'm afraid I need to prepare for a few other things coming up this afternoon. But thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed this conversation. And all I can say is like best of luck. And are you on X? Can people follow you anywhere? If people want to find out what you're talking about, can they reach out in some capacity?
Oh, sure. I mean, I can't. There's a very inactive X account that I do have called Pater Renoster. But if you'd like, I mean, I can forward you my Substack and maybe my X, and then some of the people who've enjoyed listening to me can listen to me a little bit more.
Great. No, we'll do that. We'll put in the show notes after this when I receive it. For all those watching, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you coming on board. And let me know if you actually like this podcast, right? We were doing it for 2 weeks. I think it's working out rather well, but let me know if we can improve it in some way. So thank you again, Jacques. Thank you again. And for the rest of you, hopefully see you later with Corne Mulder at 3 p.m. If not, have a wonderful weekend. See you next week. Bye-bye.